Marcus Johnson and his sister, Tyra Johnson, lived with their mother, Lisa Johnson, in a deteriorating neighborhood in East Harlem, New York. It was the summer of 2019, and the area had long been known for its high crime rates and dilapidated housing. The Johnson family resided in a small one-bedroom apartment in a public housing project. The surrounding streets were filled with rundown storefronts, and many of the local residents struggled to make a living, just like Lisa. Lisa Johnson, a 42-year-old single mother, worked tirelessly to provide for her children. She juggled two low-paying jobs, working as a cleaner at a nearby hotel during the day and as a waitress at a local diner during the night. Despite her efforts, her combined income barely covered the rent, utility bills, and basic necessities. Every month was a financial struggle. Marcus and Tyra had learned to live with the bare minimum. Their clothes were often second-hand, and meals were basic, usually consisting of pasta or rice. Tyra, a 17-year-old high school senior, was ambitious and intelligent. She had a dream of becoming a doctor. Throughout high school, she maintained excellent grades and participated in as many extracurricular activities as possible, hoping to strengthen her chances of securing a college scholarship. She was particularly interested in medical sciences, spending countless hours studying biology and volunteering at the local hospital. Her teachers believed in her potential, and her dreams seemed within reach. However, the financial situation in the Johnson household cast a shadow over Tyra's aspirations. Despite her hard work, Tyra knew that even with a scholarship, the cost of attending college, let alone medical school, was far beyond what her family could afford. There were days when she questioned whether she would ever escape the cycle of poverty that had trapped her family for generations. Tyra rarely voiced her concerns, not wanting to burden her mother, who was already stretched thin. Marcus, on the other hand, was not as academically inclined as his sister. At 19 years old, he had dropped out of high school the year before and had been searching for ways to support the family ever since. He often felt guilty watching his mother work herself to exhaustion and seeing Tyra worry about their financial future. While Lisa never directly asked Marcus to find work, the pressure to contribute was always present. Marcus spent his days doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, but the pay was irregular, and it was never enough to make a significant impact. Their neighborhood in East Harlem was plagued by gangs, dealers, and violence. It was not uncommon to hear gunshots at night or see police sirens flashing outside the apartment building. Marcus was familiar with several of the local gang members. They often hung around the street corners, offering easy money to those willing to do their bidding. Marcus had always stayed clear of that life, aware of the consequences. He had seen too many of his childhood friends end up in jail or worse, and he promised himself he would not follow the same path. Lisa, despite her exhaustion, was fiercely protective of her children. She encouraged them to avoid the wrong crowd and tried to instill in them a sense of hope. She believed that education was the only way out of their circumstances, and she placed all her hopes on Tyra's success. To Lisa, Tyra's dream of becoming a doctor represented the family's best chance at a better future. However, deep down, Lisa knew that the reality of their situation was grim. She feared that Marcus, feeling increasingly hopeless, might eventually fall into the same traps as many of the young men in their neighborhood. By the fall of 2019, Marcus Johnson was feeling increasingly desperate. One evening, while walking back from a failed job interview, Marcus ran into an old acquaintance, Terrence T. Davis. Terrence was a few years older than Marcus and had grown up in the same housing project. Unlike Marcus, Terrence had dropped out of school early and joined one of the local gangs, the Eastside crew. Over the years, he had become a mid-level player in the organization, managing a small group of younger members and handling low-level illicit substances distribution in the area. Terrence was slick and always had money in his pocket. He approached Marcus with a smile, sensing the frustration written on his face. "Yo, Marcus. Long time no see, man. You look like you've been grinding hard," Terrence said, leaning casually against a streetlight. Marcus nodded, trying to hide his desperation. "Yeah, just trying to make it out here, you know? Things ain't been easy." Terrence's expression shifted to one of understanding. "I hear you, man. You know, I've been watching you. You're a smart dude, always kept to yourself, but it's rough out here if you don't have a way in. I might have something for you. Just some small jobs, easy money, Marcus hesitated. He had seen what working for the gangs had done to other guys from the neighborhood. It was never just easy money. He thought about his mother, struggling to pay the bills, and Tyra, whose dreams of becoming a doctor seemed to be slipping away every day. "What kind of work are you talking about?" Marcus asked cautiously. Terrence smiled, sensing that Marcus was on the edge. "Nothing big, just some deliveries, you know? No heavy lifting. You run a couple of things for us, and you'll be making more money in a week than you've made in the past few months. Easy stuff. You're in control, man. You take what you want, and when you've had enough, you walk away." The promise of quick, easy cash sounded like a lifeline to Marcus. He convinced himself that he would only do it for a short while, just enough to get his family out of the hole they were in. After all, it wasn't like he was selling illicit substances or getting involved in violent crime. He would just be making deliveries, and once they had enough to pay off the debts and secure Tyra's college plans, he could walk away. It seemed simple enough. A few days later, Marcus took his first job from Terrence. It was straightforward. Pick up a package from one side of the neighborhood and deliver it to another. He was paid $500 for the job, more than he'd made in weeks of legitimate work. The cash felt heavy in his hands, and for the first time in months Marcus felt a sense of relief. He gave most of the money to his mother, telling her he had picked up a temporary gig doing deliveries for a local courier service. Lisa, too tired and stressed to question it, gratefully accepted the help. For the next few weeks, Marcus continued to run small jobs for the Eastside crew. He kept a low profile, avoiding any direct involvement with the gang's more dangerous operations. As promised, the work was simple, and the money kept coming in. Marcus was able to buy new clothes for himself and Tyra, fix some things in the apartment, and even put a little aside for Tyra's future college expenses. For the first time in a long time, things seemed to be getting better. However, deep down, Marcus knew that he was treading dangerous waters. Every time he delivered a package, he could feel the tension growing inside him. He knew that the easy money came with a cost, and it was only a matter of time before Terrence or the gang asked him to do more. But for now, he pushed those thoughts aside, telling himself that he was in control, that he could walk away whenever he wanted. But in East Harlem, no one ever really walks away. But the simplicity of the work didn't last long. As Marcus continued to complete deliveries for Terrence and the Eastside crew, the demand slowly started to increase. What started as straightforward courier jobs became more complex. One evening, Terrence approached Marcus with a different kind of task. "Yo, Marcus, you've been solid so far. I got something bigger for you now," Terrence said, his tone more serious than usual. "This ain't just a delivery. We need you to hold on to something for a few days, then move it when we say. You'll get a bigger cut for this one." Marcus knew what that meant. Holding on to a package was riskier than delivering it, and it likely contained something more valuable and illegal than what he had been moving before. But the promise of more money was tempting, and Marcus found himself agreeing before he could fully consider the consequences. The pressure began to affect his relationships at home. Lisa noticed that Marcus had become more withdrawn and tense. He was out of the house at odd hours, and although she didn't want to believe her son could be involved in anything illegal, the signs were there. The neighborhood gossip about the Eastside crew was hard to ignore. She had seen too many young men in their community get pulled into that world, and her worst fear was that Marcus might be heading down the same path. One night, Lisa confronted him. "Marcus, I've been noticing some things. You've been out late, and you're bringing in more money than I can believe from a regular job. What's going on? Please, tell me you're not involved in anything dangerous," Lisa said, her voice heavy with concern. Marcus, caught off guard, avoided eye contact. He hated lying to his mother, but he didn't want to worry her, or worse, have her try to stop him. "It's nothing, Ma. I'm just doing some side work, helping out a friend with his business. It's all good." Lisa wasn't convinced, but she also didn't push the issue. She was exhausted, and part of her didn't want to know the truth. Marcus could feel the strain building between them, and it weighed on him, adding to the tension he already felt. Tyra, too, began to sense something was off. She noticed that Marcus had become more secretive and that he was spending less time at home. While he used to be her biggest supporter, helping her with schoolwork and encouraging her to chase her dreams of becoming a doctor, Marcus now seemed distant and preoccupied. She missed the close bond they once had, but whenever she asked him about what was going on, he brushed her off with vague answers. He started losing sleep, constantly worrying about the next job, the police, or the possibility that one of the rival gangs in the area might target him. The work was no longer just about making money, it was about survival. The Eastside crew wasn't the kind of organization you could just walk away from. Every time he thought about leaving, Marcus remembered Terrence's warning. Once you're in, you're in. Ain't no walking away. One night, after a particularly tense meeting with Terrence, Marcus returned home to find Tyra sitting at the kitchen table, books spread out in front of her. She was studying for an upcoming biology exam, and for a brief moment, Marcus felt a pang of guilt. His sister was working so hard to build a future for herself, and here he was, throwing his own life away. "Hey, Marcus, do you have a minute? I could use some help with this," Tyra asked, looking up from her books. Marcus hesitated. He hadn't been around much lately, and the distance between them had grown, but he nodded and sat down next to her, trying to push aside the worries that were gnawing at him. As he helped her with her studies, Marcus realized how far he had drifted from the person he used to be. He wasn't just letting himself down, he was letting his family down too. The money he brought home seemed too good to be true, especially considering the odd jobs he claimed to be doing. Tyra wasn't naive. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where gangs ruled the streets, and she knew how easy it was for young men to get pulled into that world. But she never imagined her brother would be one of them. The realization hit her one cold evening when she accidentally overheard a conversation between Marcus and Terrence. Marcus had come home late, looking more exhausted and anxious than usual. Tyra had been in the kitchen, preparing a late-night snack, when she heard Marcus talking quietly near the front door. Curiosity got the better of her, and she peeked around the corner, careful to stay out of sight. Terrence was standing just outside, his voice low but firm. "You know you're in deep now, Marcus. Ain't no turning back. You got another run to make tomorrow, and this one's big. Don't mess it up." Marcus nodded, looking uneasy. "I got it, T. I just need a little more time to figure some things out." Terrence smirked. "Time ain't something you got, man. You're either with us or against us, and you know what happens to people who try to walk away." Tyra's heart sank as she listened. She didn't need to hear more to understand what was going on. Marcus wasn't just doing side jobs for a friend. He was involved in something much more dangerous. The realization left her in shock, and for a moment she stood frozen in place, trying to process the gravity of the situation. After Terrence left, Marcus entered the apartment, looking defeated. Tyra quickly retreated to her room, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't confront Marcus right away, not while he was on edge. She needed time to think about how to approach him, how to convince him to stop before it was too late. The next day, Tyra couldn't focus on her schoolwork. Her thoughts kept drifting back to what she had overheard the night before. She loved her brother, and she knew he had only gotten involved in this dangerous world because he felt responsible for their family. But she also knew that if he didn't find a way out soon, things would only get worse. That evening, after dinner, Tyra decided it was time to confront Marcus. She waited until their mother, Lisa, had gone to bed, and then she quietly approached him while he was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. "Marcus, we need to talk," Tyra said softly, sitting down beside him. Marcus glanced at her, his face tense. "What's up, Tyra?" Tyra took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I know what you've been doing. I overheard you talking to Terrence last night." Marcus's expression shifted from surprise to frustration. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room. "You don't know what you're talking about. Just stay out of it, Tyra. This isn't your business." Tyra stood as well, her voice rising with urgency. "How can you say that? You're my brother. Of course it's my business. I know you think you're doing this for us, for me and Mom. But this is going to destroy you, Marcus. You have to get out before it's too late." Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "You think I don't know that? You think I want to be doing this? I'm in too deep, Tyra. You don't understand. They don't just let you walk away. If I try to leave, they'll come after me, and maybe even after you and Mom." I'm doing this to protect us." Tyra's heart ached at his words, but she refused to give up. "There has to be another way, Marcus. We can find a way out together. I'll help you. We'll figure it out." Marcus shook his head, his voice breaking. "It's not that simple. You don't know what they're capable of. I'm stuck, Tyra. There's no way out." But Tyra wasn't willing to accept that. She had always been the determined one, the problem solver. If Marcus couldn't find a way out, then she would. She couldn't just stand by and watch her brother destroy his life. Over the next few days, Tyra did her research. She learned as much as she could about the Eastside crew and its leadership. She found out that the gang's leader, a man known only as Reggie, had a reputation for being ruthless, but also for respecting people who stood up to him. Tyra believed that if she could just talk to him, if she could explain that Marcus wanted out for the sake of their family, there might be a chance for a peaceful resolution. It was a risky plan, and Tyra knew it. But she couldn't let fear stop her. One afternoon, after school, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She waited until Marcus had left the house, and then made her way to a local hangout where she knew members of the Eastside crew often gathered. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the group, but she kept her head held high. "I need to talk to Reggie," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The gang members looked at her with suspicion, but one of them, recognizing her as Marcus's sister, nodded and led her to a nearby building. Tyra was taken to a dimly lit room where Reggie sat, surrounded by a few of his lieutenants. He was an imposing figure, tall and muscular, with a cold, calculating expression. Reggie raised an eyebrow as Tyra entered. "What's this? Marcus's little sister? What do you want?" Tyra swallowed her fear and stepped forward. "I need to talk to you about my brother. He wants out, and I'm here to ask you to let him go. He only got involved because he was trying to help our family, but he's not cut out for this life." Reggie stared at her for a long moment before leaning back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But this ain't a charity, sweetheart. Your brother made his choice and now he's in. There's no walking away." Tyra's heart sank, but she refused to back down. "Please, I'm asking you to let him go. He's done enough. We're just trying to survive." Reggie's smile faded, and his expression grew cold. "You don't get it, do you? There are no second chances in this game. You either stay in, or you pay the price." Tyra realized then that she had made a grave mistake. Reggie wasn't going to let Marcus go, and now she had put herself in danger as well. But before she could react, Reggie's lieutenants closed in around her, their intentions clear. Tyra's desperate attempt to save her brother had only brought her closer to the violence she had been trying to avoid. Her brave, yet reckless decision to meet with Reggie, the leader of the Eastside crew, had only put her directly in harm's way. The gang was not known for granting leniency, and her plea for Marcus's release was seen as an act of defiance. To Reggie and his crew, Tyra's actions represented not just a threat to their control over Marcus, but a challenge to their authority as a whole. It was a cold December morning when Marcus first realized something was wrong. Tyra hadn't come home the night before, and at first Marcus assumed she had stayed late at school to work on a project. But as the hours passed and there was still no word from her, his concern grew into a gnawing sense of dread. Tyra was responsible, and always let him or their mother know if she was going to be late. For her to just disappear without a trace was completely out of character. Marcus tried calling her phone multiple times, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic began to set in as he realized he had no idea where she could be. His mind raced through all the possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. It wasn't until he reached out to one of Tyra's close friends that he learned the truth. Tyra had been seen near one of the Eastside crew's known hangouts the day before. The weight of the realization hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. Tyra had gone to confront the gang about him. Fear turned to outright terror as Marcus ran through the streets, desperately searching for any sign of his sister. He visited every place he could think of: her school, the hospital, even the local police station, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Hours turned into a sleepless, nerve-wracking night as Marcus roamed the neighborhood, asking anyone who might know something, anything, about where Tyra could be. By the following afternoon, Marcus was frantic. He knew he had to face the grim reality. Tyra was missing, and the Eastside crew was likely involved. He went straight to Terrence, who had always been his point of contact within the gang. When Marcus found him in their usual spot, Terrence was leaning against a wall, smoking a cigarette. He looked up as Marcus approached, his expression unreadable. "Where's Tyra?" Marcus demanded, his voice trembling with fear and anger. Terrence took a slow drag from his cigarette before responding, his tone casual. "I heard she came around here yesterday, asking for Reggie. That true?" Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. "Yeah, it's true. What did you do to her, T? Where is she?" Terrence sighed, tossing his cigarette to the ground and crushing it under his shoe. "Man, you really messed up this time. You know the rules, Marcus. Your sister came in here talking big, thinking she could get you out. Reggie don't take kindly to people trying to interfere with his business." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What did he do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Terrence met his gaze, his expression hardening. "She crossed a line, Marcus. Reggie don't let that slide. He needed to send a message." Marcus felt his legs go weak as the full weight of Terrence's words sunk in. He could barely breathe, his mind spinning in horror at what they might have done to his sister. Without another word, Marcus turned and ran, desperate to find her, to somehow stop the nightmare from getting worse. But it was already too late. Later that evening, the news broke. Tyra Johnson's body had been found in a secluded alley not far from the neighborhood. She had been beaten and left for dead, her lifeless body discovered by a passerby who called the police. The brutality of the crime shocked the community, but for Marcus, it was a devastating confirmation of his worst fears. When the police arrived at the Johnson apartment to deliver the news, Lisa collapsed in grief. Marcus, numb with shock, barely heard the officers' words as they explained what had happened. The details were too horrifying to process. Tyra had been targeted as a warning, her death meant to serve as a reminder of the consequences of crossing the Eastside crew. The days that followed were a blur of grief and guilt for Marcus. He couldn't escape the crushing weight of responsibility for what had happened to his sister. Tyra had died trying to protect him, trying to save him from the life he had fallen into. And now, because of his choices, she was gone forever. Her teachers and classmates spoke of her dreams of becoming a doctor, how she had always worked so hard to succeed despite the challenges she faced. But as candles flickered in the cold night air, Marcus couldn't bring himself to join the crowd. He stood at a distance, his heart filled with rage and sorrow. It wasn't long before the authorities came knocking. The police had been investigating the Eastside crew for months, building a case against the gang for illicit substances distribution, extortion, and several violent crimes in the area. Tyra's murder had drawn increased attention to the gang's activities, and law enforcement had begun intensifying their efforts to dismantle the organization. In their pursuit, they needed someone on the inside, someone who could testify against the crew and provide evidence of their illegal operations. For the gang, Marcus was the perfect scapegoat. One evening in early January 2020, Marcus was sitting in his apartment, staring blankly at the TV, when the door burst open. Police officers swarmed in, their voices loud and authoritative as they ordered him to the ground. Marcus didn't resist. He had seen this coming, had been waiting for it in the back of his mind, knowing that the end was inevitable. As they cuffed his hands behind his back and read him his rights, Marcus barely registered the words. All he could think about was Tyra, how she had died because of him, and how this was the final nail in the coffin of the life he had once hoped to escape. The charges against Marcus were severe. The Eastside crew had turned on him, feeding information to the police about his involvement in their criminal activities. They provided evidence of his participation in illicit substances trafficking and delivery operations, multiple instances where Marcus had moved illegal substances across the city for the gang. The prosecution argued that Marcus had been an active participant in the gang's enterprise, helping to distribute illicit substances that fueled the violence and crime in East Harlem. Though Marcus had never been directly involved in violent acts, His association with the crew and his role in their illicit substances operations made him complicit in the broader criminal network. The gang, eager to protect their higher-ranking members, had thrown Marcus under the bus, offering him up as a sacrificial lamb to avoid harsher scrutiny from law enforcement. Marcus became the fall guy, arrested, charged, and ultimately convicted for his role in the Eastside crew's operations. In court, Marcus remained silent as the evidence was presented against him. He didn't try to defend himself. There was no point. He had made his choices, and now he had to face the consequences. But the worst punishment wasn't the impending prison sentence. It was the crushing guilt that consumed him every day. He had lost his sister, Tyra, and with her death, any chance he had of finding redemption or peace. When the judge handed down the sentence, 15 years in prison for illicit substances trafficking and conspiracy to commit criminal activities, Marcus barely reacted. He had already been living in his own personal prison, one built from the regret and anguish over what had happened to Tyra. As the guards led him out of the courtroom in chains, Marcus caught a glimpse of his mother, Lisa, sitting in the back row. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow from weeks of crying. She had lost both of her children, Tyra to the violence of the streets, and now Marcus to the prison system. For Lisa, the pain was unimaginable. She had worked her entire life to protect her children, doing everything in her power to give them a chance at a better future. But now, she was left alone, her dreams for them crushed under the weight of tragedy and loss. The vibrant, determined daughter, who had dreamed of becoming a doctor, was gone, her life cut short by senseless violence. And her son, who had only wanted to help his family, was now locked away, lost to a system that had swallowed him whole.